and welcome to The Art of Being Human. On the last segment, I talked about adoption, how to get a child ready to understand that they have been adopted and how it can be a very good experience for them. Today, I want to talk about divorce, which is also very traumatic in a child's life. And if you are the product of a divorce, you understand how traumatic it's been for you. I'm going to start off with a story concerning an elderly pastor and myself and what he asked me to do to have a seminar on divorce. So this elderly pastor called me. He's a very, very nice man, and I think a very wise man. And he asked me if I would do a seminar on divorce for preteens and teenagers that were in his Sunday school classes. He wanted a seminar to help them over the trauma of divorce, and I agreed to do it. And as part of we discussed it together. We kind of co-led the seminar. And then toward the end of it, we played a game in which it was would be like, say, Ask Ann Landers or something like that. The children would take a paper and pen and they would write out their questions and then put them in a bucket, and we would, each one of us, he would do it once and then I would do it. We alternated. We each would take a slip of paper, read the question, and then answer it, or we would answer it together. Now, the reason for doing this is the fact that a child might not feel free and might be very uncomfortable in discussing a family situation in front of other children, or if their parents heard that they did it, their parents might be quite upset about it, and they may have to face whatever rage the parent had. So this kept them safer. And one little girl asked a question, and the pastor got this one, and she said, "My parents are getting divorced. Do I have the right to be angry over it?" And the pastor, as I said, was very, very wise. And he said something, and I'll never forget it, so I'm going to quote him, and this is exactly what he said. And remember, he's kind of a farmerish guy with the overalls and the suspenders and so forth, but a very nice person. He said, "You're darn tootin' you have the right to be angry. We brought you into this world, and by gory, we owe you something." And I was so proud of his answer, because what it did, and which was so important to that child and anyone in that situation, was that he validated their emotions. A lot of times when a divorce is impending, a child feels that they have to push their emotions down. They can't talk about them, they can't reveal their anger, they can't reveal anything that's going on with them mentally, because somehow one parent or the other would be angry. The other thing that would happen is that one parent would use that against the other parent. The child is in a unique situation, and the situation is that they love both parents, and they want to have the support and help and love of both parents. They should not ever be in a situation where they feel they have to choose between one or the other. That's not natural to them. It's not natural to anybody. So when he said, "You have the right to be angry," he validated her emotions, and that's what needs to be done. Never try to force your emotions out of the way. Never try to push them down and not recognize them, because that is the basis of a lot of problems such as depression and anxiety. It comes from those repressed emotions that you were never able to acknowledge because you never felt safe. Children, and especially children of abuse, which I'm going to get into at a later time, they always feel that they can't say anything, because if they say anything, then they're going to make a parent angry and they're going to be punished for it, and it's not a safe situation. It just is not a safe situation. So he validated her emotions. Now, the other alternative, which I'm glad he didn't do, was to trivialize them. There's a difference between validation and trivialization of emotions. When you validate your emotions, you announce them, or you don't have to tell everybody, but you acknowledge them. You even acknowledge them to yourself. I feel really angry about this. I feel really upset about this. Something's going on and I don't like it. Instead of, I gotta get over it, I gotta suck it up, I gotta go on, I gotta pretend everything is all right. The problem is everything is not all right. And if you don't validate those emotions and acknowledge them, then you press them down, you repress them, and your brain remembers them, even though at some point you may not even remember, but your brain certainly does. And what happens is you get symptoms of irritability, depression, anger, volatility, and your disposition changes, and you get into a lot of trouble because the emotions were not validated and were not acknowledged. Your body will want you to acknowledge the emotions that you experience. And one thing that you can remember that will be helpful, and my mother used to tell me this, and she was right, if you're struggling with an emotion and it seems too much, in your own mind, validate it. Yes, I feel terrible. Yes, I want to do something that's wrong, but I won't. Yes, I feel a certain way. I'm depressed, I'm angry, I'm emotional, I feel distant, I feel lonely, I feel like I'm alone from everybody else, and you acknowledge it. If you would not acknowledge it and admit to it, even if it's just to yourself and nobody else, you validate the emotion and it loses some of its intensity. If you can acknowledge something, then it's not so intense. It actually loses some of its intensity. And if you trivialize it, you do the opposite. You tell yourself your emotions aren't important. It's just an emotion. Don't put up with it. Press it down. Don't pay attention to it. Don't acknowledge it. You are trivializing it as if it's not important. But the thing is, you live with your emotions on a daily basis. You react to your emotions on a daily basis. And it really, really has to be acknowledged. So if you find out that your parents are getting a divorce and you're angry about it, well, then you can even say you're angry, or even if you don't dare to say it, acknowledge to yourself, this is a natural process, I'm angry, and it's okay. It's okay to be angry over something that's not fair. It's okay to be a human being. It's okay to want to strike out even though you can't allow yourself to do it. It's okay to be depressed. It's okay to be a human being. And I used to tell my clients that all the time. If you don't beat yourself up because you're a human being. You're made to be a human being. You are a human being. It's all right to be a human being. Join the rest of the race. Everybody else is having the same problems, you see. So that's something that you have to validate and not trivialize your emotions. And this is what he did for this little girl, and I was very happy about that. He was a very wise person. He was a very good pastor. And he would take children and deal with them in a very positive way. Children always blame themselves for family problems. And the question is why? If a parent is separated or divorced, some children are relieved because if they're in the middle of a situation where there's a lot of arguing and one parent moves out, then the arguing may stop. And so for that reason, they can be relieved when there is a divorce, but they never really feel good about it. And most children want their parents together. They want both a mom and a dad in any way they can have them. And sometimes they go to great lengths to try to bring their parents together, even when inwardly they know it's not going to work. I know one little girl, she had an allergy to something, and so she ate a lot of it. She figured if her parents saw her really sick with this allergic reaction, which she was bound to get, it would bring them back together. Of course, it didn't work, but she made herself sick in order for the purpose of trying to get them back together. And so you have to realize, or children have to realize, that if there is a separation or if there is a divorce, that you can still have contact unless it's an abusive relationship. They can still probably have contact with the spouse or every other weekend situation, stuff like that. It's not the best, but at least they can share their parents in a healthier way than if they were gone. You know, a divorce is sometimes more difficult than a death to handle for children and adults, and the reason is this. With a death, it's permanent. the parent is gone. The person is gone. You're not going to be seeing them again. With a divorce, they may be living in the same city. You may run into them here and there, and that only churns up the anxieties that we're trying to settle down. So sometimes the permanency of a separation, and if there's a long distance between the parents, one moves out of state somewhere, hundreds of miles away, that might actually be better than to have a divorced parent around where they see a child and then the child longs to have them back, and it gets into a horrible situation. So children do blame themselves, however, and I need to get into that. The question is, why do children always blame themselves for their parents' problems? And I have a theory about it, and I don't know if this theory can be proved or not, but if you take a child is dependent on both parents. A child loves both parents. A child looks at the parents almost like they're a god. They are the ones that provide the care, the comfort, the food. They are the ones who provide the warm house, the pets. Anything that the child has comes from the parent. And without the parents, they wouldn't have anything, or at least they think they wouldn't have anything. And so they view the parents as having it all together. They're the big people, you know. They have it all together. They can do all kinds of things. They're strong. They can go out and lift things. If a child loses a toy or if a child breaks a toy, who fixes it? The parent fixes it. You know, so they help them, and they can't imagine life without the two parents that they consider to be pretty much perfect human beings, at least when they're young. So what happens if something goes awry and there's a bad family situation that develops and it doesn't work out? Then who's to blame for it? You know, we're living in a society where if anything happens, somebody has to take the blame. It's a very punitive society. It can't be because life is like that. It has to be because somebody did something. You know, if they do something, they might have to stand in a corner for 5 minutes, or they might have some kind of punishment. So something happened, something went wrong, somebody did something. Somebody has to be punished for doing something. So it would be natural for a child to blame themselves. It must have been me. I must have done something that caused my parents not to like each other, because the parents' focus is on the child, and now when they're arguing with each other, the child thinks they did something wrong. It's my fault. I should have been a better kid. I should have tried to keep my parents together, but I couldn't do it. No child is ever responsible for the dysfunction of a family. No child is ever responsible if the parents can't get along with each other. A parent should not bring a child into a discussion and make the child the focal point of why they are not getting along. It's just plain not fair. The child hasn't got anything to do with it. The child can't prevent it. The child can't bring the parents back together again, although they may try. And so they end up by blaming themselves. I was horrible. I was a bad kid. I got into trouble. But children can't share in that responsibility. They're too young. The brain is not developed enough for them to be able to even understand what's going on. So the best thing that they can do, that the parents can do for a child if they are going to be divorced, show the child that you love them, assure the child that you are loved, that they are loved by both parents, that both parents want them, and that they are not to blame for any of it. Don't allow a child to feel that they are to blame for any of it. So when I work with children for abuse situations or divorce situations or the death of a parent, whatever it is, I always make sure I tell them over and over again ad nauseum, it's not your fault, you didn't do anything wrong. Because a child cannot control an adult situation. They don't have the mentality for it. You've got to remember, the basic personality pattern is laid down at about age 5. By age 5, there are a lot of divorces. A child is still just developing their personality at that age. And the brain doesn't stop developing until mid-20s. I'm going to say about 25 years old. So therefore, a young child does not have the mentality to understand why a divorce occurs, and they cannot understand that they cannot take responsibility for it. So it would be unfair for a parent to make sure that the child took the responsibility for a parent being divorced, because that's a guilt that they cannot carry, and it's a guilt that will destroy them. If they carry that guilt for years and years, they cannot be normal emotionally, because they blame themselves forever for their parents' divorce. It's just not fair. And so therefore you can't do that. But I think the theory, getting back to my theory, that they look at their parents as if they're accomplished and completed and they have it all together, and then if something goes wrong, it can't be the parents. They're already perfect. They're already all together. So therefore it must be me as a child that is causing this. I must have been the bad one. And any child will do it. Every child will do it. In any kind of a relationship, they will take the blame because they can't figure a way that it could be somebody else. And so therefore they do it. So you must, as if you're talking in terms of helping a child through a divorce, you have to let them realize that it's not their fault. They didn't do anything wrong. They're there, and they're part of it, but it's not because that they're there that the divorce is going on. So children must constantly be reassured that they are loved and they are not to blame for the divorce, and if possible, that they will be able to see the opposite parent for certain periods of time. So you have these situations where on one weekend the child will go with one parent, and the next weekend they go with the other parent, and it's a partial solution but not really a good solution. They need to see both parents, but then what happens is sometimes the parents pit themselves against each other and use the child as a battering ram. You know, when you're with me, I give you freedom, you can do whatever you want, and I buy you a lot of toys, and your mother doesn't do that. You know, and they try to get the child to take a side. Very, very, very bad move to try to get the child to take a side with one parent against the other. And in the end, if that happens, when they grow up and understand what's going on, they'll have a lot of resentment because they were forced or encouraged to believe something about the other parent, which may not even be true. So it's a difficult situation. Parents should never talk to their child negatively about the other person. Never. The parent must never demean the other parent. So there can't be that kind of a child interaction. They're mentally incapable of handling that because of their age and because of their lack of brain development. Demeaning should never go on in a marriage that's going to be breaking up. Children see what's going on. They're not dumb, you know. They see what's going on, and you think you may be doing things in secret, but the children catch on, and they observe that. They have no way to know how to put it in perspective, and they have no way to know how to deal with it. So they deal with it in various ways. Sometimes they act out. When a child acts out, they get into trouble. They do things that normally they wouldn't do. You know, they may take a crayon and mark up somebody's car, or they may get into fights, or they may start using curse words, or whatever they hear their parents doing, they pass on to other people. One of the reasons why children are bullied, and we're going to get into that in another segment, is that if a child is bullied, he bullies another child. He gives somebody else the same treatment as somebody gave him. I mean, it's no excuse to allow it to go on. You can't allow bullying to go on, but that's just the matter of it. The children get caught up in between the parents, and life is absolutely miserable for them. So what you need to do is kind of put your animosity to one side and be civil around each other, and don't allow the child to take any blame, and don't get the child involved in it because he can't handle that. So they actually get fearful. Children will get fearful when their security is threatened. You've got to remember, a child is a part of your family life. And there are other people that are a part of your life too, but as far as they are concerned, the parents are their only life. it's their only way of getting taken care of. And what happens to them if their world falls apart and the parents who have always taken care of them aren't going to be there anymore? Or one of them's not going to be there anymore, or they're going to get shifted around to various people. Maybe they'll be taken care of by a grandmother or an aunt or something. You know, it makes it very confusing for the child whose world consists of him and his parents. You know, and if something goes awry there, it just goes awry and it's never a good situation. So they should not have to bear adult problems. Children can't handle adult problems. So I think what I'm going to do, we don't have too much time left, and I'm going to probably leave it there. But to give you some suggestions, if you are considering a divorce, let the child know that you love them. Let them know that you both love them, and that you're going to make sure that things are going to try to go smoothly for them. They are not to blame. They're going to be able to see both parents, and you're going to have a cordial relationship around the other spouse when you're in the presence of the child. Keep your arguments to yourself and not in front of children who always pick up what's going on, because it's like they've got little antennae attached to them and they just know what's going on. You can't fool them. You know, you can't fool them, but they can't make sense of what they're hearing either, and they don't need to hear what's not good for them. So I'm going to close it here, and the next time I'm going into a special segment on bullying, and I hope that you will join me then.